excuse me, to make a little video here. And we already made a video showing, we're talking about 9, 40, and 45, and etc. And how overall the 40 is just the more complete cartridge that covers all the bases. We're just talking about the cartridges and the ballistics. Everyone just talks about 9mm with technology and more capacity. So if 1 or 2 more rounds is that your only thing, like every gun, if you want to get mag extensions, so at the end of the day, we can talk about self-defense, and if you're 9mm, you're holding 16, and you're 40, you're holding 15 or 14, or if you're holding 18 and you're 17 plus 1 9mm, or you're holding 15 or 16, maybe even 17 and you're 40, whatever it is, you're gonna get maybe 1 or 2 less rounds in the same exact size, and that's undebatable. So 9mm is the king for capacity. But in self-defense, that first round, the second round, or someone actually threatening you with your life, someone else's life, that first round is the round you need to work the most. If you don't stop the threat, immediately, you or someone else might be, hurt, damaged, killed, etc. And then you can worry about when you get to your 15th, 16th round. You still got 1 or 2 more rounds in your 9mm. Okay, you should always carry an extra mag, at least one. Point is this. Here's some basic data points. And look at the numbers. Remember, if someone has a knife or a gun and they're going to kill you, what would you rather have? Now, of course, the debate of, I shot placement and I'm just better with a knife. Well, I get that. And if you can't handle a little more power, that's either a training issue. I don't understand. I shoot 40 and 9 the same, accurate, reliable, fast-paced. Is it slightly more recoil of 40? Okay, maybe slightly, but are you using some micro pistol, or using a small compact like a Glock 27? Even then, and I've had a Glock 27 in the past. I had no problem. Center mass, easy, at 5, 10, 15 yards. It's not a problem. So if you're shooting a more mid-size, like a P2000 or a Glock 23, it is what it is. So let's just talk about the ballistics. So in this case, most people 9mm because it's cheaper. You're shooting range ammo, in the 115 grain. When they get to hollow points, they're generally going to go 124. But we're going to cover the bases here, and we're going with the standard weights from the lightest to the heaviest. So 115, 124, 135, and 147. Excuse me, as I drink water. And the 40, we have 135, 155, 165, and 180. Now you can go extreme spreads on both sides and go ultra light, or how much heavier. Very unlikely you're going to find weighted ammo that's going to go heavier than 147 on 9 and 180 on 40. So I'm not even bringing that up. When you stand in 9mm, you're talking about 115 grain. Excuse me, and 1180 feet per second. And that's on the high side for 115. I took a bunch of data from various sites, various companies. If you only look at, let's see, like Federal, though, Federal seems to overall they keep their standard pressures lower. It's a major company, and I think because many people use them for the range and etc., or even defense. I think a big company like that, they go on the safer side, and they don't load. Even within standard pressure, there is some play. So some companies, their standard pressure ammo is maybe 5-10% lower than other companies' standard ammo. So but I went with more of the full power standard pressure loadings. Okay. Now, of course, your barrel length and everything else is always going to be a factor. Okay, and if you're using micro stuff with 2.5, 3-inch barrels, or 3 1/4, or whatever, you're not going to see full potential what the box says at all. So anyways, though, On the high side at 115, 1180, you're talking about 356 pounds of pressure. Most standard loadings, like under Federal, other brands, you could be around 320 to 340, so it could be less energy. On the lightest side, a 40 cal, you very rarely see 135 ammo. That's light for 40, but it's still generally the lightest grain bullet you're going to see in 40. And in 135, which is still 20 grains heavier than this, which is 20 grains of 115, is more than 1/5, more than, but less than 1/6. So somewhere between under 20% heavier, right? The exact number of 20 out of 115. If this was 120 grain, it'd be 1/6 heavier, but it's 115. So between 1/5 and 1/6, do the math on that. 17%. So it's a heavier bullet. It's a bigger bullet. Now, I showed both. This is the extreme of standard pressure. This is not plus P loading. Look at this. This is Underwood with standard pressure, 1,400 feet per second on a 135, and 588 pounds of pressure. Over 230 pounds more pressure. You're talking about well more than 50%. Well more than 50% power. You want that first round. But let's go with, that's still 135 grain. This was another brand. I think it's a Corbon. 1325 and 526. So even if you go with a slower 135 grain at 1325, it's still heavier than this bullet and going much faster than that. And 526, you're not even seeing 526 when you go to plus P, or barely, not even, definitely not even plus P or plus P plus. And we'll get to that later. Standard pressured 135 is smoking. Smoke show. Not even close on. So on the lightest grain, shortest bullet for 9 and 40 and standard weights, the 135 is smoking it. Smoke show. And if you only had time, you could say, well, I have 2 more rounds in my 9 or 1 more round in my 9. You might have only time for 1 or 2 shots before, well, is the threat over at that point? Or but if the threat is still attacking, what will give you better? What would give you a better chance? Then you have the psychological factor. This coming in much hotter. It's going to be also much louder. And the report of that, the sound of that from the other side, is going to be much more intimidating. That is a factor not for every criminal that's attacking you, but for one that doesn't want to die, doesn't have a death wish, but he just wanted to rob you with a knife or a gun. That's a lot more intimidating. It is. I mean, you shoot a gun that's 135 at 1,400 or even 13 1/4. You're getting into 357 Magnum territory, especially at like a 2-inch or 2.5-inch 357 Magnum. Even that's not a pussycat load. That's smoking. 124 grain. A lot of people prefer 124 grain for carry, or a lot of cops use 124 grain standard pressure. 1,120 feet per second, okay? 345, let's see if you can highball 350 pounds of energy if you're using at least a 4-inch barrel, 4 to 4.5 inch. If you're using your 3-inch micro, you're not even gonna see that. But it's, it's a good cartridge. 155 grain, the second weight for 40. You're looking at 1,300 feet per second, 582. And there's also like this cartridge here, that's a Federal cartridge, which Federal, this is not a light load at all, but it's not loading 155 to the potential that it could be under standard pressure. This one here would be at 500 pounds of energy. But anyways, so 155, and hold on, this is 165. I'm talking about this Winchester. Do I have it? I don't feel like pulling it out right now. The Winchester silver tip is 155 grain, and that's loaded to 500 pounds of energy. So even at 155, whether you're going with the fullest potential at around this 582, I mean, this is a hard hitting round. So even if you go with a lesser hard hitting round at 500 pounds of energy, which compared to that, you're still talking about it's 150 pounds more energy. So maybe around what? Is it 35-40% more power than that? Okay, and it's a 30 grain heavier bullet. So it's still a wider bullet, a heavier bullet, and with much more energy. 135 grain 9mm, which is a newer weight. You don't see that many brands making 135. Hornady makes a good cartridge. The standard pressure, you're looking at around 965, 273. Because you're getting that's heavy, getting to heavier grain territory for 9mm. 9mm, it doesn't push these heavier bullets as fast as, let's say, with 40. So you're going to see diminished energy. Now, it is going to be a longer bullet. And if the bullet being longer, if it does expand with that potential, it would be a larger hollow point than like 125 or 115. But with it hitting slower, it might not have enough energy. With these, when you get to heavier grains, I wouldn't recommend a real short barrel. Now, if you up it with a plus P, it might help out to get to a full potential. But with a heavier grain bullet, I would go with a longer barrel, because if you use a real short barrel with a heavier grain, now you're in 9mm. That bullet and that design, not to say you better use a full metal jacket, but a very slow hollow point, it's not going to expand and do what you're asking it to do, what you want to expand and penetrate less. 165 now in the third weight category. So it's 30 grains heavier again. 1150, 484. Now, this is around average. You know what I'm saying? This was one of the loadings. There was loadings that were a little slightly higher. There were loadings that were a little slightly lower. But so just showing that right there. So you can go. Some brands, like Federal, will load like the 165. So it depends. You'll see like 400 and change, or 415, or 420 pounds of energy. But other brands loaded below 165, extremely hot. But I didn't show the greatest potential to try to, not say keep it fair, but I mean, it is what it is. So 165 at 1150 feet per second, a lot heavier and substantially faster and a lot more energy. Then you get to 147, which, a lot of people, you're not even going to find a lot of 147. Go to the store and try to find 147, whether it's range ammo or carry ammo. It's not as popular, and you're not going to see it that much. 1,000 feet per second, and once again, that would be out of a full-size barrel, 4 to 5 inch barrel. You'd be using your micro, and now because of that heavier grain, you're going to lose a lot of velocity. And at best, with your 4 to 5 inch barrel, 1,000 feet, you want 326 pounds of energy, which, okay, but out of your micro, you're not going to get that. 180 grain on the heavy side of 40, and this is showing a standard load, and there are 180s. This is around 400 pounds of energy, because when you go with a heavier bullet in a cartridge, you're going to get less energy, but it's a trade-off, but you're getting a larger, longer bullet, which, some people prefer the weight against a target, and they prefer the weight for penetration and for barriers, etc. So it's not, in some cases, this would still be better than that, because you say, well, this has got more energy and more velocity, so in every category, but it's a shorter bullet, and it might not penetrate as deeper against a thicker target or a larger animal per se, or God forbid a bear or something like that, or a mountain lion, but or something with a thicker skin or a thicker skull. If you are in bear territory, but in every category, I'd rather have this over that, because even if they don't expand and their standard diameters, this is much wider, and this is much heavier. It's a bigger bullet, but it's also coming in faster in every category and with substantially much more energy. It's undeniable. And like I said, you can get 180s in standard pressure going to 420 pounds of pressure, etc. So this is standard pressure. Now, when we get to plus P 9mm, right, which, is common enough where you could find it, but you're not going to find it as much as standard pressure. And on top of that, depending which firearm you're using, well, all firearms plus P is going to wear the parts out faster than 9. But that's if you're doing a steady diet. Most people are not shooting tons of plus P in any caliber. And here's the thing about all plus P. Plus P is going to be harder to find and a lot more expensive. I mean, a lot. And generally, you're only going to find it in 20 round boxes. Very rarely you find Plus P 50 round boxes. So, in the 9mm. So, and depending on your gun, your gun might not even rated for 9mm Plus P. You know, if you're carrying like a little Sky 9 or a Taurus, an older model, or you know, and even if you're carrying like a Glock, like a 26, you might want to make sure your springs. You know, if you modify your guns to have lighter springs, so easier to rack, or you know, faster follow-up shots. If you tricked out, let's say, even a hammer-fired gun, people don't realize when you trick out a hammer-fired gun, because with a hammer-fire, it's not just a striker, the trigger spring and everything. When you a hammer-fired, you have the hammer spring. And this is striker here, but you would have the hammer spring down here in the frame, like in this HK. So let's just say you sent this to a gunsmith, you know, or LTT or anyone, and you want to have this a lighter trigger pull. Well, you know, like let's say even like a Beretta 92, they're going to put a weaker spring here because the trigger is connected to the trigger bar, and you have the hammer here, and then you have the strut, and you have hammer spring in here. And when you go with a lighter hammer spring to get a lighter trigger pull, yeah, maybe you're more accurate and faster follow. You know, you like that better. But when you decrease the weight of a trigger by decreasing the weight of the hammer spring to get a better trigger pull, you're making the system weaker. And now the slide cycling is going to be faster, because as that slide comes back, it's going to compress the hammer spring in the back of the gun. Now, this is striker fire, but for example, with the other HK, with the hammer fire. And so when you go with a weaker spring, that overall the system's weaker, and now the slides come back much faster. It's going to put more wear on everything, the rails, the parts, the extractor, because now everything has to work faster, and you got to create more friction and more heat. So the point is, if you're going with Plus P ammo, and then you get to by making that the whole system with weaker, you know, springs to make it a better trigger pull, the hammer is going to be not hitting with energy on the firing pin, and so therefore, if you have certain brands that have harder primers, or maybe the depth's not exactly perfect, you could get light primer strike and the round doesn't go off. So the reason why, like a standard NATO certified or standard duty weapon like a P2000 or a 92 or a C226 has a certain trigger pull, that's all connected with the springs. It's that way when that hammer, so the double action pull is pretty heavy, or even the single action, I'd like to make it more crisp. The reason why it has that level of pull is to give the whole thing, the slide cycling is all connected, and but making the slide cycle a little slower, it is more reliable, because the faster that slide cycles, now everything, the magazines have to, you know, if the timing is off or the slide cycling is so fast and your mags are worn out, maybe the timing's off and it jams. Also, the extractor might have to be tuned, because now you know, the whole thing you're asking, once you start modifying the pistol to make it easier, lighter trigger pulls, you're making the system weaker. And that's why standard issued pistols in their original form, like where, you know, are designed that way. So anyways, we're getting a little off topic, but keep that in mind. They have their reasons behind it for long-term durability. You know, and the Red 92 is a perfect example. Get like a stock M9 or a stock at 92. The double action pull is kind of a little stiff. And they break in, you know, you shoot 1,000 rounds and they break in a little bit. But there's a reason for that. And anyways, but so you Plus P 9mm. But if you're going to shoot them at steady diet, well, first of all, you're going to make sure that weapon in that chamber, in that barrel, can handle the higher pressure. Top of that, if you got a piece of shit gun, you might have some trouble. 115 grain Plus P. On the high side, you're looking like 1250, around 400 pounds of energy, which, you know, it's getting pretty stout for 9mm. 124 grain, around the same, you know, give or take. You see 397, Gold dot listed is around 400, so let's just say the same thing, around 400 pounds of energy. Obviously, the 9mm plus P, the 115 is coming a little faster. 124 is coming a little slower, but it's a heavier bullet. So, and then once again, you're talking about full-size barrels, 4 to 5 inch barrels. If you shoot out your little 3-inch barrel, you're not going to see that. The 135 grain, I couldn't get this information. Everything I looked on that, I found one magazine. The only brand was Hornady, making it a 135 plus P, and theirs was listed as 1110. Now, out of different barrels they tested, like the shorter barrels were coming a little slower, and then on the full-size barrels, like 4.5-inch barrels, was coming a little faster. So somewhere in between. But you're going to see around this velocity, and most people are going to not carry a Glock 17 full-size 4.5-inch barrel. It is what it is. So you can see, 147 plus P, talking about around 1,135 feet per second, giving around 420 pounds of energy. So these are all good defense cartridges. But once again, people talk about 9mm less recoil. Well, you start practicing with plus P, you're going to see that plus P is going to have, I'm not going to say a lot more recoil than standard pressure 9mm, but it'll have more recoil than your standard 9mm. So to shoot as good, most people are not going to shoot as good with their plus P than a standard pressure. So it is what it is. So to ask your 9mm, and none of this is even as good as standard pressure 40. So standard pressure 40, it is crushing. And you get the plus P plus, 115 grain. You're talking about 1330 and change, 450 pounds, 452, 120. And good luck finding 9mm plus P plus. I'm throwing this in for shits and giggles. Nobody's carrying plus. There's going to be one guy that's carrying 9mm plus P plus. God bless him. Okay. And once again, shooting this out of a 3-inch micro pistol, you're not going to see this velocity. Okay. So in a way, it's like if you're shooting plus P plus out of a little barrel, 3-inch barrel, you're probably going to get around plus P velocity. And if you're shooting plus P out of a little 3-inch gun, you're probably going to be getting around standard pressure. And if you're shooting standard pressure out of a little 3-inch barrel, you're not going to see this. You're going to get what we call it, 9mm special. So your barrel length is a factor, and the type of barrel, whereas a Glock or an HK barrel, polygonal or hexagonal rifling it's a tighter squeeze of the bullet, and you're gonna get a little more pressure and a little more velocity. Whereas if you're using standard rifle groove, you're gonna get less at the same barrel length. So 147, yeah, you're talking about. I skipped 124. You're at 1300 on 461. And this should be. And most companies will tell you not to shoot plus P plus because if you know anything about SAMI specs, plus P plus is not. I don't think it is SAMI certified. So once you get to this level of pressure for a cartridge, it can be dangerous. So I don't recommend plus P plus. And plus P, well, nobody's buying it because most people's 9mm because they want to shoot cheaper at the end of the day. So you get to this level of pressure, it's going to be also much higher. Might as well say plus, I don't know, plus money. I don't know what the fuck. I couldn't think of something funny. Okay, then you go to a 40 cal. Now this is the thing, when I originally looked this up, I thought this was plus P. This is not, but that's why I switched it back over there. This loading here from Underwood, that's a standard pressure, so we can skip that. And that's standard pressure 588. Show me anyone doing this, even on the plus P plus. There's not that much 40 cal plus P ammo because standard 40 cal pressure is just destroying 9mm and a lot of 45. So it's not necessary for plus P 40 ammo really. At 155 grain plus P, some brands had it at 1300 and 582. Once again, you're getting the sub 600 pounds of energy. That's really blowing away all standard pressure 45 and most plus P 45. Sub 600 pounds of energy. This is getting into 357 Magnum territory and 10mm on the lower end or standard end. There's a lot of companies that load 10mm. They're loading like a 180 grain to like 1250, or some companies 1200 feet per second. They're not loading 10mm to full potential. You get the full potential 10mm, you should be getting 600 to 700 pounds of energy. or else what's the point? Just you let go with 40. And then around 40 cal plus P on the 180 grain on the heavy side of weight, 1,100 feet. So over the 1,000, you're getting 11 and 484. But now you're getting that big, heavy, long bullet. So all across the board, I hope that this brought some knowledge. And once again, look up all the information. Because once again, there's so many different brands and loads. But at the end of the day, this is a good guideline just to show the differences. And the main thing is showing the differences. That no matter how you cook it, grains or go to plus P, the 40 is doing everything better, bigger, faster, harder hitting, period. It's just undeniable. But that's why they say, well, I hold 1 or 2 more rounds. Okay. Yeah, well, technology. Also, technology. So this SIG V Crown, and I have 9mm SIG V Crowns. It's not the same technology. They said, well, we're gonna make the 9mm technology. It's gonna be so much better than, or your 9mm gold dots. It's gonna be better technology than the 40 cal gold dots. It's the same technology. So, there are, but at the end of the day, there's only so much technology per se can do. And the actual cartridge itself, the loading, and the 9mm, it was designed over 100 years ago. The 40 caliber cartridge was designed, 40 years ago? Not even 40 years ago. It was the late 80s, because it was in a sense a downsized, shortened 10mm. So really by 1990, really, you start seeing 40 caliber handguns. So anyways, though, so 40 is a more modern cartridge that in every category, if you want it to be, now, of course, could you download 40 cal to be around 9mm pressure and overall energy? Sure. There are brands that if you look at the standard velocity, that really they just weaken the 40 cal range ammo, so it feels like you're shooting a 9. Like maybe they'll dumb it down. So the most common loading in the 40 is 180 and then 165, but more than likely you're gonna see. It's funny how a 9mm most common you see range ammo is 115. But the most common grain for 40 cal you're gonna see is 180. Why that is, who the fuck knows? But I think that because with 180 in the 40 caliber side, these are much more significantly more energy, and it's gonna be more powerful as far as your shooting, because as far as cycling the gun, where the 180 would be even it's going to be more of a thump, but it's going to be much less velocity than these. And so overall, I shot them all. This would be, I don't want to say soft, because the gun, I shot these side by side, and I felt the 180 pushed the gun back a little more, but the 165s and 155s is definitely a little more muzzle rise due to that much increased velocity. It'll be a much bigger flash and higher energy dump. Now, you decide what you feel. Do you feel that you'd rather have just more velocity, or would you rather have the larger bullet? In the best case, as far as if you're talking about power, it's the worst case for recoil, would be on any case to go with the biggest version with plus P or plus P plus, because you're trying to get as big as a bullet, but push it as hard as possible. But most people are not shooting 147 plus P plus. You know what I'm saying? And most people are not shooting 40 plus P, and good luck finding it, or is it even necessary? I mean, I would feel totally fine even in the woods with standard 40 caliber pressure. So it is what it is. Both great cartridges. 9mm has become more mainstream, where 40 caliber, because the price per se, but the thing is that you're seeing a lot of 40 cal ammo prices become even lower than 9mm, because more people are just shooting 9mm. So, but there's still plenty of 40 caliber out there, and you do what you want. But if my life was on the line, and defending my family and your freedom, because if you get attacked and you get killed or maimed, and there goes your freedom, right? I would go with 40 all day. This is just my opinion, But my opinion here is based on a lot of statistical facts. And now you can say, well, in a lot of shooting different categories, 9mm did very similar, whatever, blah, blah, blah. If you shoot 9mm better and you can't handle 40, then stick with the 9mm. But if you could handle 40, in shot placement, it as far as barriers, auto glass, heavy clothing, larger criminal, or larger animal in the woods, whatever it is, the 40 caliber is just better. It's just better. It's a better cartridge. Now, as far as what's popular, as far as trading at the stores, FFL, yeah, the 9mm is more popular. And so, in a way, 40 cal pistols, it's never been a better time to buy them used at gun stores because they're losing their value because people just want to buy and trade and sell 9mm. So, a lot of 40 cal guns are sitting around. So, you could find, so you know what, shoot your 9, but maybe pick up a used 40 caliber, but make sure it's in good shape. I would recommend, most common gun obviously is Glocks, right? And if it's like a Gen 3, whatever, definitely just buy a new $15, $20, get a standard Glock spring, buy a new spring for your Glock, a factory spring, okay, and just right out the way, throw it, put the other one on the side and refresh that, because especially with the Glocks, the Gen 3 was not really designed for 40 caliber, and that was the issue, and so that the spring will wear out faster than a 9mm. So that's my opinion on that. But if you're shooting an HK, and I talked to them, they're like, well, if you want, you could change the spring after 10,000 rounds of 40 caliber. No one's shooting 10,000 rounds of 40 caliber. And if they say 10,000 recommended on an HK, you can go much longer than that. So it is what it is. Whereas if you're shooting a 1911, and especially an officer size, that's a totally different topic. And you're, not that you see tons of 40 caliber 1911s, but they're out there. But it is what it is. I wish you all the best. Hopefully you learned something, that 9mm is a viable cartridge. And I don't want you to think that some 9mm hater, but I just want to put out some common sense information that 40 cal is not 40 short and weak at all. 40 cal destroys against 38. 40 cal, it gets into territories of some 357 Magnum, especially against a 2 or 3 inch barrel, and then forget about with 45. So 45 is a good cartridge, and I would rather have 45 over 9, but the 45 has its limitations. It gets more expensive to train, and some people would complain of the recoil. And with 45, especially if you go with a shorter barrel, you're not going to get the listed velocity at all. So I didn't bring up the 45 here with this because most people are shooting 9mm, and they just shit on 40 caliber like it's stupid. It's just a dumb cartridge, or it doesn't even work, or it's not as effective, or 9mm is just as good, or the technology, or the capacity. Okay, so that extra capacity, the only difference, if it's 1 or 2 less rounds, that's at the end of the magazine. So for the first, let's say 13 to 15 rounds of your 40 versus your 15 to 17 rounds of your 9, both have the same, you both are shooting, right? This is going to do way more damage. I just can't stress it enough. It's more effective. It's a more effective cartridge. There's just no debating it. There's just no fucking debating it. So hopefully you learned something. And 40 caliber is an American design cartridge by Smith & Wesson, where 9mm was made by Nazis. It is what it is. Well, it was before the Nazis and around World War I, but it is what it is. 40 cal is American made, American designed. That in a way, 40 cal took the power of like 45, but really in some ways increased it, but in the capacity similar to a 9. And so you really shouldn't be comparing 40 to 9. That's disrespectful to this. You look at the facts. If these were 2 of your kids, this guy's getting better scores on his report card. Crushing it. Crushes it. no comparison. Stay fresh. Use quality soaps.